He's welcome to stay here, ask further questions if he would like. So I'm not sure if
I just want to say we just heard from a real hero.
Panelists.
So many times when people, their countries are liberated, all these people in America are screaming and yelling. They want to help their country, and then they don't put their money where their mouth is. Their country is liberated, and they don't go back. This gentleman here was a very, very successful doctor, Najmuddin Karim. We know each other for 1 billion years. And he put his heart and soul into all of this. He was a great man. Okay, we're supposed to talk about Iran. I'll have some very general comments, some contextual things. And in an earlier session, we talked about Turkey. And Turkey and Iran are doing very, very well together to try to quash any efforts of any type of Kurdish entity anywhere. The truth is that the existence of the Kurds as a people is as far as both Iran and Turkey are concerned, are a threat, an existential threat to these countries. One of the speakers earlier mentioned in Turkey, I think it was Aykan, who spoke about the name of the country. Had they chosen the name Anatolia instead of Turkey, instead of one thing, just possibly everybody could have had a chance. But once they chose the name of, which was at the time the largest group, and by a lot of views right now in Turkey, Erdogan himself, the dictator of Turkey, said that according to their figures, by the year 2038, since the Kurdish birth rate in Turkey is much higher than the ethnic Turkish birth rate, that he says by then it'd be 50-50. But the truth is that the Interior Ministry knows, but by what's people's self-definition, we're probably closer to 50-50 now. We don't know. There's no real way of knowing. Any government figures in the Middle East are basically, they're jokes. They're not serious. And that's Turkey, and that is Iran. How many Kurds do we have in Iran? I went to university in Iran during the early and mid stages of the revolution in Mashhad, which is not a Kurdish area, but northeastern Iran. But there is a series of Kurds that were brought there about 2 centuries or so before. And there were 6 million or so Kurds, according to the Iranian government at the time. There were 36 million people in the country. So what do we got? 1/6, is that right? So the birth rate among the Kurds there is probably the same as the rest of Iran. So how many Kurds do we think there probably are now? Most of them are Sunni, and we know that the Iranian regime hates the Sunnis. They do have their Sunnis that they trot out to make the rest of us feel good that Iran is an inclusive country, but it's basically a joke. Iran has more important problems to worry about right now than necessarily Iraq or in Syria. Why? Because it is being squeezed right now by the sanctions, which are getting worse and worse. And all the Europeans can talk nicely and all that, and what they're going to do, but no one wants to avoid problems with the United States. What do we have, a 20-some-odd trillion economy, as opposed to Iran is 400 billion? Iran has like 80 million people. Guess what? Israel has about 9 million people and has the same 400 billion in economy. Iran's a joke compared to the United States. And all these countries, even the major bank in China, Kurun, I think it's called, I just was in China having discussions on this, and they're pulling out from Iran. That's what the Iranians are worried about. And as the Americans squeeze more and more, we'll see what happens. The good thing about the president of the United States we have now, and I'm a strong supporter of Trump, is that under the previous administration, whatever the Iranians got, he gave into. Trump's unpredictability, and diplomats don't like such a thing. The fact of the matter is that that's exactly what we need right now vis-a-vis Iran, because they don't know what to do, which is wonderful. Now, vis-a-vis Rojava. It's very simple. We know that the Iranians are desperate, if anything, to link up by land. But it is in America's strategic interests that that not happen. They want to link up with the Mediterranean, with Lebanon, with Syria. So we need you. We need you. So you want to know what is American policy today? The problem is that it's always been, I worked for the American government, I worked in the Pentagon for 28 years. This branch of the government has this policy, another branch has another. That's why basically we ended up, I think, failing in Iraq. We didn't have a united policy. Vis-a-vis you Kurds, you look at people, Jews like me, if we could be united like you are. You see, Sarah just laughed. Also, it's exactly right. We Jews yell and scream at each other, but here's the difference between what we Jews and Kurds do. We yell and scream, and our hands are in the air. We don't touch each other. Every once in a while, we do kill somebody. It's terrible, and we're ashamed of it, because that's not what Jews do. If I could beg you one thing, and it's not going to happen, you cannot change a culture. Cultures are like elephants. They walk slow. Everything is slowly. If we could do anything if there's one lesson that the Jews that you might learn something from what we learned is that we scream and yell, we do everything, but most of the time, in the end, we don't kill each other. Look at the Knesset. If you see it, you can see this all on YouTube. All we do is scream and yell at each other. You kill your own, if you are your own, because your definition of what is your own is not the same. Rojava has tons of Kurds who have a very difficult time going into Barzani land. I know it's a little better now, but let's just hope it will stay better. But we know the Arabic has this phrase, Yom Asal, Yom Basal, a day of honey and a day of onions. Now, I just want to say vis-a-vis Iran and Turkey, you're dealing with failed states. Imagine the following, that you go into a cake store and there are two cakes on sale. One is gorgeous, beautiful icing. You can't see what's inside, of course. And next to it is icing with khaki-colored, like army uniform. Which one are you going to buy? The one you're going to naturally be drawn to is the one which is beautiful. But guess what? They're rotten inside. You can't see that. You can only see the beautiful icing, the frosting. That's the Turkish state. Erdogan has tons and tons of internal problems. And now, my description of what Turkish politics is all around, and that is what is happening also in Iran today, thanks in large part to President Trump, and in my opinion, what he's working with the Israelis, but I don't know. I mean, look what the Israelis have managed to do in Iran. Unbelievable. Absolutely. It seems to me they're all working together, but you know what? I don't work for any government anymore. It's over, you know, I'm out of the government for 8.5 years or something already. But what do we see? That you're now seeing at the senior levels of the Iranian government, in the Savoy Pastoron, the Revolutionary Guards, among the mullahs, all sorts of public disputes you didn't see before. You're also seeing women out in the streets. By law, you know, they got to be covered. God forbid that they'll excite a man or something like that. And the women are out in the street throwing their hijabs up in the air, and they're dancing and doing all sorts of things like this. You got to realize how dangerous that is for the regime. So far, they seem to have their hands on things. But Iran, and I lived through this, I lived through the early and mid stages of the Iranian Revolution before, is that this is a process. And just because, oh my God, they managed to oppress things here. But what is the thing? There's a game that we used to play as children. You knock down one peg and another peg comes up somewhere else. This is where it seems like we're headed. The mountains of Turkish Kurdistan, very, very high. And all of a sudden, that's the honey days in the Arab Republic. And then they have these huge, huge descents, and these valleys could be the lows like a quarter of a kilometer or something like that, maybe a half kilometer, then boom, another set of. That is politics all over the Middle East. That is what is happening both in Iran, that is what is happening in Turkey. All this is to the benefit long term, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I see it, to the Kurds. Why? Because in the end, you just need to pursue, be dogged. The Jews, after 2,000 years, came back to their ancient homeland and slowly but surely put administration together. Nejmeddin Karim before ran his area. There are a bunch of people, unfortunately not enough, who came back with the experience that they learned. Build your state, be dogged, never give up, and sooner or later, look, you have two natural allies. You say you can't figure out what American policy is. You're listening to too many people. The fact of the matter is, as long as this awful regime, terrorist regime in Iran is in power, you're a strategic ally of the United States. And so your long-term allies are what some countries possibly would call the big Satan and the little Satan, excuse me. And we'll leave it there.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, David.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be very, very brief so that we have a little bit of time.
Is this yours?